All right, guys, welcome back. Welcome back to the podcast. So today I'm tired. It's my own fault. I kind of wanted to talk about an interesting topic, kind of along the lines of healing, along the lines of what people consider witchcraft, or divination, or occult type of, activities versus like maybe modern medicine, and other like healing traditions from, some other cultures. I mean, I can't go into like every single culture, but I've found it interesting mostly from the Christian tradition perspectives. So I was listening to this YouTube episode where the channel is called The Amish Potato. This guy is pretty cool. He left the Amish community that he was from, and him and his family live independently from the Amish, but are connected to a type of Protestant church. And I like how he interviews people about different topics. Not every topic is really my favorite, but he has this episode pretty recently where he interviewed or let a guy talk. His name was Eldon Yoder, Eldon Yoder, and the title of the video was Brafe Among the Amish, Live with Eldon Yoder, and that word is spelled Braufe. From what it seems like they translate, it seems like it's roughly the Pennsylvania Dutch terminology used for a type of witchcraft or a type of healing. They in this video are labeling it as healing, are labeling it as a type of witchcraft, but it sounds like a lot of the Amish people that rely on that type of healing, they don't really think of it as witchcraft. They think of it as just like a healing, and there's kind of this debate going on, like, is it of God, of Jesus? Is it of Satan or witchcraft? And that kind of got me into all these questions. So questions about, I can't remember if I even finished this recording, but a recording that I was gonna do that was kind of about topics like Lucifer, the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and Satan. In the Christian tradition, a lot of times we have the tradition of believing that these are all the same being, maybe at different points in time, but they're all the same thing. As I understand, that is a more newer idea that, commonly Jews don't believe that same exact explanation of those terms that you would see in the Bible. The serpent, Satan, Lucifer, those aren't the same exact being or person, and they don't necessarily have the same terminology or beliefs that, Protestant Christianity teaches about, like hell versus Gehenna, and then like in Judaism, Hasatan, like the particle ha in like ha in Hebrew is the, so it's like we would say like the Bible, the prophet, things like that. So they say ha-satan, which is where we get the word Satan, but ha-satan is like the, and then satan is like it roughly translates to like adversary, or something that's like against. I don't know if that's like against humans, against God, against what. I think it might be both, but I don't know for sure. So when we start looking at the reason why I mentioned those is because then, I started thinking into this idea of, because when we say something is witchcraft, it's demonic, it's of the occult, we usually connect that with Satan, right? And so that's an interesting perspective, because I would think, okay, if Judaism has a different viewpoint of Satan from Christianity, then what is it that's actually considered demonic or witchcraft? If it's not satanic, or if it's, biblical, and why is it not too clear? It seems like there are passages that were mentioned in this YouTube channel, in Deuteronomy, in the book of Acts. So Deuteronomy is in the Torah, in the beginning of the Old Testament. It's the fifth book of the Old Testament, the last book of the Torah, and then Acts is after the Gospels and the New Testament. So you have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, then Deuteronomy is the last one. And then in the New Testament, you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and then Acts is the book right after. Acts of the Apostles. That's like after the account of the stories of Jesus being born and then crucified. Then it goes into what the early Christian church looked like. It's kind of that transition between the Judaism that you see in the Bible, where people were followers of Jesus, but it was like new, and then leading into kind of, Jews converting to Christianity, and then Gentiles, who are anyone who is non-Jewish, converting to Christianity. You start seeing that more and more. And then the Gentiles eventually, that culture gets very much into the Christian culture more so than the Jewish culture, kind of following the council at Nicaea when the Jews got excommunicated from the Jewish synagogues, and then following, was it Antiochus Epiphanes or whoever that, I think it was like a Roman leader or something, whoever it was that kind of ingrained pagan traditions and rituals into Christianity, and it almost erased out the Jewish culture, so that nowadays, as people that practice modern day Christianity, either in Catholicism or Protestantism, a lot of times there's no Jewish culture really too obvious in there. Like, it looks so different, right? And so I say all that to say that it gets a little tricky trying to figure that kind of stuff out. Like, is it okay? Is it not okay? So, Judaism, Catholicism, Protestantism, they all kind of have different viewpoints about, like, how Satan became, how Lucifer, I guess, technically is in the Bible, and then Satan and the serpent and all that, like, kind of the roles of that being, and usually is connected to evil. And then you usually have the other extreme side, that's God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, that's connected to the good side. And in Judaism, you don't really have Jesus in there. Now there is in Judaism something called ruach. Ruach means spirit, kind of like you see in I don't know. I'd have to double check if that's in the beginning of in the beginning of Genesis, how it says, like, that there was darkness hovering over the face of the deep. I'm not too sure if that if it mentions like anything about spirit then, but a common theme in Christianity is about, the Trinity, God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. You don't see that in Judaism. You don't see it in all of Christianity. I know Jehovah's Witnesses don't really believe similarly, and there are some other Protestant religions that don't really believe in the Trinity. So that's a whole different thing too. And then you have this kind of like new age practices and kind of like modern day kind of practices of things that are healing as in going to like a doctor, or self-medicating type of thing. So you have things along the lines of, I gotta write this down, you have things along the lines of drugs, which can be legal, illegal drugs. You can have prescriptions, and you can have like substances, or plant medicines, things like that. And then also there's kind of like Eastern techniques of, just having your mind, the goal to be having your mind to be kind of more whole, more focused, less anxiety, less ego driven, through meditation, breath work, yoga, things like that. And I do commonly hear a lot of Christianity teachings that talk about some kind of concerns about meditation and yoga and that kind of stuff, crystals, those types of things. It's kind of interesting that a lot of these themes have been coming up during this week, of what I've been, studying about. The Book of Acts has come up like multiple times this week for me. And I'm not even really like actively really like studying too much stuff. It's just kind of interesting how it's like, I tuned into this quick. I wanted to see like what was going on at San Diego Rock Church, and so I tuned into like the most recent sermon real quick, and they were talking about the Book of Acts and talking about like how people, not that wasn't the main topic, but talking about how sometimes people put like their trust in like alcohol, or trust in partying, or trust in crystals, or trust in all these other things versus trusting in God. And then I was looking at something else either this week or last week that kind of had something to do with the Book of Acts. And then again, listening to this talk on YouTube about Prophet, and then how that guy was mentioning the Book of Acts. And I'm just like, it's kind of interesting, because for me, the Book of Acts is one of those books that I kind of tend to like, not really avoid, but it's kind of like an intense book. It's like, early movement. And growing up Adventist, there's this app, it's a free app, it's called EGW Writings. It stands for Ellen G. White, EGW Writings. And there's also EGW Writings 2, like the number 2, and it has all these books. And so one book in Adventism is The Great Controversy. It does have like it basically talks about the universe and the concept of heaven, and how heaven was before how heaven was pretty much before Lucifer, the angel Lucifer, was out of heaven, and before he became Satan, or the serpent on earth. So basically the general basic story of that is that, Jesus was at the right hand of God. In a lot of Adventist tradition, you hear about Michael, the mention of Michael being at God's right hand, Michael being Jesus, and then Lucifer being being an angel that was second after Jesus, but was jealous of Jesus, and that Lucifer was like the head of like music ministry. I don't know how else to word that, but like musical heavenly music director or something. I don't know what the term. This isn't in the Bible. This is I've heard it not only from Adventist traditions, but these are other traditional teachings that you find outside of the Bible about the concept of what was going on, before. Like, how did the serpent even get to the Garden of Eden? This is pre Garden of Eden, maybe even pre-Earth. I'd have to go back. I'm gonna go back and review that kind of stuff. But so the concept that they talk about is that Lucifer was jealous, and got his kind of crew of angels, and they all got cast out of heaven onto earth. And that's how Satan and the serpent and demons and things like that got introduced into earth. And that's also supposedly related to this when you hear in the story of Noah in Genesis about how there's that sentence that says there were giants in the land, and the Nephilim that mated with the daughters of like humans, basically. There were some kind of beings that were giant beings that mated with the human women and created these like super beings that were like really intelligent beyond necessity, and they taught people how to make weapons and metallic kind of like weapons and tools and things like that. And it got to a point where they were learning all this stuff that made humans no longer as innocent, and they got out of hand. And this led to the point where God was like, I need to destroy the earth in a flood to kind of like re-cleanse everything, because it's like way out of whack now. So that's how Noah got involved with that. So that's kind of the backstory. And then there's also this other book. It's not an Adventist book, but it's a book called the Book of Enoch. Now, Enoch isn't mentioned too much in the Bible. There is, some explanation saying he walked with God. A lot of times what people assume when that is said is that he went to heaven within like a living, like he was living while he went to heaven. Some people interpret that to mean that somebody got abducted by aliens. There are a few people in the Bible that you do see these concepts of the chariot of fire coming down and getting involved with people and taking them up to heaven. Or you hear the term they walked with God, meaning that they had some kind of either supernatural or spiritual connection, or that they didn't die before they actually went to heaven, or it's some kind of an abduction experience or something. I really don't know. These are like multiple different types of theories. There are even more theories than the ones that I know about, but I only focus on usually like Jewish tradition, Adventist tradition, a little bit about other like Catholic and Protestant traditions, and then kind of more about like modern stuff, like when like for people who aren't really believing in the Bible word for word, they kind of think more so like these were supernatural or like alien extraterrestrial type of experiences that people were worshiping and thinking that, okay, these are gods, these are demons, these are angels, these are this or that people interpreted that as like angels and demons and all this stuff, when it was potentially like aliens and UFOs and things like that. I wasn't there. I don't know the truth. I don't really know. I'm just talking about all this because it's very interesting, because I do know that when it does come to Christian traditions, There's always been this bit of manipulation in the culture of like, we need to make the people obey. And so they kind of interweave into Christian belief and faith all these traditions and ideas and teachings that we today are taught in sermons and believe them from a lens that has maybe nothing to do with like the origins of the actual script that was written. It gets like, it's like the game of like telephone where it gets like passed down and passed down, but without actually reading the book in the way that like the original people read it. So when Jews study, with scriptures and other types of teachings, traditional Jews, tend to read original texts in Hebrew. It's traditional that somebody becomes bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah near the age of 12 or so. And they usually have a portion for that service that they are, speaking on and learning about. But throughout that time, they've kind of proven themselves that they are like able to be like a man or a woman now, and like son of the Torah, daughter of the Torah. Like, they've proven that they kind of know how to study this in a traditional sense. And people that are really like ultra orthodox, really more conservative about their studying and traditions and religion in Judaism. You see the ultra orthodox Jews, the Orthodox Jews, the Hasidic Jews. Those are just a few types of Jews that are very, studious. They spend a lot of their time studying. There's so many books and scriptures, and I've heard it called learning schedules. There's learning schedules that people kind of gravitate towards to learn certain types of things, and you can just have this as part of your lifestyle. Everything from the way you eat to how you eat to who you socialize with to what you wear to how you dress to what you do at work and which days you do and do not work and what you do with your money. All of this stuff, is being learned and taught throughout the year, every day. And you have a community of people around you who you kind of bounce things off of. And there's different learning styles of how you kind of like read something literally, or you read it, in a certain way with commentary, or there's like a talk where these sirens. Give it a second. All right. I hope those people are okay, whatever that emergency is that's going on. I've mentioned before, there's a lot of sirens lately. It's kind of a scary time. Here comes another one. That's not a local one from our corner. That one's coming past our house. Okay, so I had to pause things because there was a lot. There's a lot going on. So I found the terms. So it says about texts of Torah study. Again, this is from Wikipedia, but I have heard this before. It says the text of Torah can be studied on any of 4 levels as described in the Zohar. So there's Peshat, which is the plain, simple, or literal reading. There's Remez, the allegorical reading through texts, hint, or allusion. There's Darash, which is the metaphorical reading through a rabbinic sermons comparison / allusion. And then they say Midrash. So, so I don't know if that's all 4. Anyways, so yeah, if you're looking at the types of study, that's what they say. And I'm trying to like find it. Sorry, it's like, okay, Sod. The hidden meaning, reading through text, secret or mystery, which is Kabbalah. And so I think what you often see in the weekly parsha portions would be peshat, which is you're literally reading it either in Hebrew with the translation into English, or just the Hebrew in English, or just the English, or whatever you read. And then you would do peshat and then darash, which would be the metaphorical reading through a rabbinic sermons, or comparison / illustration midrash. So yeah, that's kind of what you hear more so. I feel like Christianity uses more of what's like remez and darash, which is like allegorical reading through text, hint or allusion, and then like sermons and things like that. It doesn't go too much into like spiritualism, like the Kabbalah type of stuff, or anything that would be like related to that. And so that's kind of how I would describe, the differences in learning. Because if you're learning like a certain style, it's like a lot of times, you might not learn the direct literal meaning, especially if you're listening to a sermon and you're listening to somebody else reading it. A lot of times, at least in Christian tradition, they don't really read like the whole like book from start to finish at once. I was joking with my mom about that, saying like, how funny would it be? Like, I'm waiting to hear a sermon where they just start and they're just like, we're just going to start reading the Bible from start to finish. Genesis 1:1, let's go. And just like start reading it for like ever. We don't usually get that. Usually it's like portions. Like this guy in the Bravo video. What's it even called? Brofe, the guy in the Brofe video, he was mentioning about, how in Amish tradition, their Bible is written in an ancient form of German, that people don't really speak because they speak Pennsylvania Dutch, and then their Bible is written in some ancient form of German. So it's not really like, it would almost be like Americans reading like Old English. Like, you can read it, but it doesn't make any sense to you unless you've really studied. And they're also, I guess, from what I've learned, not really encouraged to really deeply study the actual scripture themselves. So let's see. If I look for like Old English examples, it looks like, man, I just want to find like an example that's not a video. Anyways, I can't find one real quick, so whatever. But I'm gonna get back to this. Alright, guys, getting back to it. Yeah, I'm trying to record during breaks. So yeah, I was a little bit kind of listening to I kind of rewatch or re-listen to different stuff because I like podcasts and interviews and stuff like that. There's one with CJ the Amish Potato talking to Eli Yoder about their Amish faith in general, and it was kind of just interesting that they were taught that it's considered sinful or wrong or bad to question the traditions of their community, or also sinful, wrong, and bad to tell outsiders, so Englishers or anybody who's not Amish, to tell them about what they do. Traditionally, on why. Alright, so I looked in the Ellen G. White book, The Great Controversy. You can find it online for free if you just Google the PDF. You can find it on that app that I mentioned. You can find it even on YouTube. They have like an audio book reading, and you can find timestamps of the chapters. So it's chapter 29 that kind of talks about this idea about Lucifer in heaven before the serpent came to earth, and before Satan came to earth. And there's another term that I forgot that they mentioned, the devil. So that's another term that we hear a lot. But I do think, I think that chapter is chapter 29 in The Great Controversy. So, like, I did kind of re-listen to that chapter, and so it does talk about, basically, that, just to be short with it, that Lucifer, they identified Lucifer as a cherub angel, his role being the covering cherub, and he had rights to, like, he had like a leadership position in heaven, and rights to pretty much everything, with the exception of certain heavenly council meetings that were held between God and Jesus and I don't know who else. And that's where the jealousy came from, where Lucifer started talking about the laws that were governing heavenly beings, teaching other angels about, like misleading them pretty much, or teaching them about like how it's not fair, and that there shouldn't be laws governing heavenly beings. And then kind of like a revolt broke out eventually, and that I'm trying to read my notes here. I can't read my writing. I put them on a napkin, of course. That kind of created this whole situation of, Jesus having to be crucified for the sins of humankind, and, that service to God is considered the service of love. So anything that's the service of love would be the service of God. Anything outside of that would be, otherwise not really looked at as good. And so you could either be, this is according to kind of how the belief goes, is you can either be in service to God or not. And then that's when the concept of the devil comes up. And then they mentioned like burning like an oven, like that would be like the end result for the people who were not on God's side. And that's kind of what we tend to refer to as hell. And then I believe that after, I could have misunderstood this, but after the crucifixion of Jesus, that he went back up to heaven. And so, yeah, and then with Satan's revolting angels, that those angels were to follow they were like kind of revolting because they believed after, following Lucifer, that the angels were to follow their own law and not God's law. And, there was some kind of like victim, like it sounds like in the story, that Lucifer was kind of playing the victim and getting his ego involved and wanting to hold like secret meetings to mislead other angels that he kind of like had influence over, and then that those other angels were kind of just like gravitating towards his beliefs. But even when confronted about it by Jesus, he was kind of like playing it down, kind of like, that's not really what's going on. And like he was kind of spinning it in a manipulative way, like spinning kind of like the concepts that were coming up and stuff, and that God didn't really seem to make too much of just let it, it seems like God let it kind of play out until there was actually action on Lucifer and those angels following Lucifer. There was actually action on their part when they actually started to actively revolt, that that God banished them. And then that's where the concept of Satan comes in. Satan coming into the human experience, and that's with the chapter pretty much saying the origins of sin. And so you can do with that what you may. It's a lot of information. I'm not here to say, okay, this is true, okay, that's false over there, okay, follow this, okay, don't follow that. I'm just saying, like, these are questions that a lot of people have, and I think a lot of times we're never really told or taught or like learn about it too much. We're told, follow this belief, follow the Bible, or else you're gonna burn in hell if you don't do what it says. And then there's all this conflicting information out there, conflicting traditions, different cultural beliefs about like who's doing the right thing. Every denomination feels like they're doing the right thing and that everybody else is on the wrong path for some reason or another. But ultimately, what I really have to say about when it comes to religion and belief and things like that, a lot of times it comes down more so to ego than anything else. Especially in Christianity, I noticed this kind of desire to convert everybody. Kind of like, I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad. Like, I understand the viewpoint that a lot of Christians are raised to believe that other people who are not Christians are gonna burn in hell, are gonna be on a life path during their own living personal life on this earth of pain and suffering because they're not following the Bible. What I can say is that what I do notice is there is negative, toxic, unhealthy environments in the Christian community as well as in the non-Christian communities. I think I've seen on all ends. I've seen it on both sides. So I wouldn't necessarily say that all the time that somebody who's Christian is always better off or seeming better in their health environment than someone who's not Christian. It kind of just depends on a lot of their mindset, their energy levels, their maintenance of their own like health conditions, how they maintain their body, like with health. exercise, eating right, balancing their lifestyles properly. And there are a lot of things that are biblical that can lead to life being better, like if you're not stealing or lying or cheating or killing or you know um you know sleeping with other people's spouses, especially without any consent, or if it's just like cheating kind of stuff, and you know getting wrapped up in having a mindset where you're too like addicted or focused on things like chasing money or chasing fame or chasing you know uh you know relationships, or chasing getting high, or chasing being drunk, or chasing partying, or things like that. There are things that can get out of control if you're not focused also on like some kind of like a boundary with it, or like some kind of a spiritual focus, or some kind of focus where you're like internally like growing, like personal growth type of topics. I could see it getting way out of hand. But it's not to say that Christians don't deal with those things too. It's not to say that Christians don't hide it, or that they don't, I feel like a lot of times they kind of hide it more. They feel like they need to hide it more. But, yeah, just, I would say overall, focusing on like toxic relationships, toxic environments, trying to do without those, and then having a good lifestyle balance overall, regardless of what you believe. That's usually a pretty good start. And then all the details kind of fall into place with your own faith, your own beliefs, your own learning, and just kind of what you feel like you're being called towards or pulled towards, and just knowing that religion in a lot of ways has some similarities to politics and other things. Like, you have a person who's in charge, who's telling you what to do, or people who are leaders who are telling other people what to do. And then you generally have people who are the role of following those people in charge. But what I notice in religion is that when you have questions, or when you have concerns, or when you have, I wouldn't necessarily always call it doubt, but I would just call it questions, because usually doubt is a form of questioning. When you have questions, usually you're not met with an open-minded answer. You're not usually met with, okay, here's the history behind all this, why we do this, why we don't do this. Because there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that Christians don't do. There's a lot of stuff in the Bible that we're told this is not applicable to you this time. There's a lot of stuff that we're told, oh, Jews do that and Christians don't do that. And then there's some overlap. And as you would think, even Jews don't have all the same exact beliefs and ways of handling things, and ways of beliefs about how you should be. And then Christians also don't. I think there's always like the general themes, but then, there's always that kind of like, these people don't really believe this. They don't believe the same exact things as one another. And so that is the type of thing that I would say is, gets confusing for people, where it's like, like for myself, I know I always, I was raised in the Adventist church, and they always say, the Adventists keep the commandments. This is what we were taught. The Adventists keep the commandments. They're the most right church. They're the most correct church because they keep the commandments. All of the 10 commandments, there are 613 commandments in the Bible. Adventists focus on the 10 commandments, and they really harp on the fourth commandment, which is about keeping the Sabbath holy, the Jewish Sabbath holy. They don't really consider Sunday as Sabbath. They consider Friday sunset to Saturday sunset as the Sabbath period time. And feel like all the other churches that don't do that are on a different, journey, to some extent. And so that's kind of what, Adventists get taught. And, that any church, this happens in, I think, all churches, where you're always taught that your church is better for this reason or that reason. Okay, so if you look at the Adventist church and you look at, the focus on the Sabbath and the 10 Commandments, and then they focus also on certain dietary restrictions that you can find in the book of, in other books of the Old Testament, right? But then there's stuff within chapters before and after those verses that talk about the dietary restrictions that are the similar ones to what Jews will or won't eat. When you look at the other similar dietary restrictions, other restrictions that aren't necessarily dietary, the Adventist church would say, oh, like, when you try to address, okay, how can we do just this portion that has to do with the food, but we don't do all this other stuff about like tearing down your house when there's mold or doing all these other kind of things. Like, why don't we do any of that? And they're just like, oh, Jews do that, or oh, we just don't do that, or oh, people couldn't really answer, right? And I noticed, I didn't go to a lot of Messianic Jewish congregations, but I went to 2 of them. And the rabbis were friends. And what I learned in those congregations was more so, they look at all the commandments in the whole Bible, Old Testament and the New Testament. And to me, in my mind, I'm not saying that I do or don't follow or believe I'm not even talking about my own personal life. I'm just saying, in my mind, the Messianic Jews tend to follow the whole Bible more so than the other churches because of the connection and learning about the Jewish culture and the acceptance of Jesus and following the New Testament. That's my opinion of how I see it. I'm not saying I do what they do or follow what they do. I do my own thing according to what I think I'm led to do. I don't really feel like, I feel like I was raised in enough of different kind of denominations where it's like, yeah, I could put a label on myself to one or another or whatever, but I feel like they're all somewhat limiting, right? Because I don't know the difference, Jews for Jesus versus Messianic Jews. I feel like one of them, you're born Jewish and keep the traditions and convert toward thinking more along the lines of traditional Judaism. And the other, you're not really keeping their traditions. I mean, you are coming from one, you're coming from a Jewish background. The other one, you're coming from a Christian background or a non-Jewish background. So that's kind of where my head kind of goes with a lot of this kind of stuff, where it's like, that's kind of like the beginning of my thought process when we start talking about like the occult or demonic things, or what's evil, what's not evil, what's right, what's not right, what's according to the law of God versus not the law of God. I mean, these are all the questions and kind of background of what I learn about or have learned about according to like common theories that you see. Now, there are always going to be other theories out there. There's not enough time in the day in the world for me to be just like learning all this stuff all the time. But I think that covers the major basis for like common beliefs that you see about how it is that different groups start talking about like what you do or don't follow in the religion. Usually you're taught there's a line between what's good and of God and what's bad and of Satan. and then, you just go from there. But there's also the question of, is this whole connection between Lucifer, the name Lucifer, these theories and traditions taught about Lucifer? You don't see a lot of deep explanation of the term Lucifer in the Bible. You see the word pop up a little bit, or the interpretation of the morning star in there, but you don't really see like a whole full-on thing. There's a lot of verses that are interpreted as being what do you say? There's a lot of verses that are interpreted as being what would you call it? Like what was I saying? Sorry, I lost my thought. There are a lot of verses that are interpreted as being prophetic verses related to this concept of Lucifer. But I mean, if we're already looking at the whole idea of who Lucifer is Lucifer an angel? What was going on in heaven with Lucifer and God and Jesus and all those angels? What are angels in the first place? Are they, aliens? Are they, these winged, bright, shining, white linen clothing with a trumpet with multiple wings, just like flying around, harmonizing with their voices, and singing? Like, what are they exactly? And so there's all these questions that come up with, like, what exactly is even going on with the basics? Like, those are like the basics, because it's hard to look at something like, is somebody, the whole question I had was that concept of prophet. Like, basically the guy was saying he was taken to a person as a child who did some form of healing when he got like canker sores inside of his mouth. This person did some kind of a ritual with some kind of a blade or a knife where they were shining, reflecting light, I guess, off the sun or something to shine onto the canker sores or something. And then a couple days later, he felt better. And I think there was something else with like headaches or something that like the parents would take this Amish boy to this healer of a sort that was also, I believe, in the Amish community, and practiced was called Broffe. And then from that point, there was a he noticed that, he had a child with colic. He had children that had like headaches, and other people would bring little baby children to this man when he was an adult, and he said about newborn age to about age 5, he would basically just take the kid close to him, hold the child toward his chest, and they would feel better. They would stop crying, they would stop screaming, and they, had like a temporary form of healing where they felt better. It sounds like it wasn't a lengthy process, and, they were able to feel healed, at least for that time being. And then they would return. Like, it sounds like they were similar, like the same parents returning to this guy. Now, the interesting thing about the Amish church is a lot of them, overall they don't follow a lot of what's considered like worldly modern things. And so what's interesting about the Amish church is that, they do have a completely different looking lifestyle. So it's interesting that there would be something that's considered or labeled as a form, like they would label a form of healing as witchcraft when they seem like they're not really trying to actively do witchcraft, you know what I mean? And so that's interesting. But another interesting thing is that the Amish church overall, at least some of the communities, if not most, or probably all, maybe all of them, from the way it sounds like, most anyways, it sounds like a lot of the communities of the people who are talking on YouTube talk more so about that, you know, they were always taught, don't question the church, don't question the community, don't don't read too much into the Bible. The services, and from what I understand, in the communities they speak Pennsylvania Dutch, but the services weren't held necessarily in Pennsylvania Dutch, so there would be preachers that would be preaching in an old German language. The Bible is in an old German language. People didn't really speak this old German language, so they're kind of taught by these leaders that teach about their traditions more so than literally reading in the Bible and teaching their congregations and communities about the actual Bible itself. And then a lot of the Amish seem like they eventually later on picked up reading the actual Bible for themselves, and surprisingly finding a whole bunch of stuff that they were never taught about. And they were mentioning that, in this guy's community, witchcraft was never mentioned, and also that they weren't really like connected to the Bible, but also they are considered like a Christian religion and one of the stricter Christian religions. And so it's just really interesting. I'm not calling them a cult. I don't really know. I'm just saying, like, when we start looking at these ideas of like what's good, what's evil, it's hard to even know the foundation of things. Like, is Lucifer even Satan? Did this stuff with Lucifer even happen in heaven with God and Jesus? Is that why there's this concept of good and evil? Because it sounds like before Lucifer decided to create this whole uprising and revolt, that there was harmony in heaven and in the universe. That's what it mentions, and that's also not in the Bible. And so it's kind of like, I don't really know. These are just questions. I'm more so here to provide questions more than answers, and ideas and kind of theories about things. What's that line in the Social Network? I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm just a fan who came to say hi. It's kind of like that's what Justin Timberlake said as he was playing the character of Sean Parker, the Napster guy. Like, yeah, that's kind of how I feel about a lot of this stuff. Like, I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm just kind of creatively putting ideas out there. That's kind of how I look at ideas. I'm not trying to like mislead or confuse people or whatever. I'm a big fan of asking questions. I'm a big fan of diving into questions and being like, even if I don't find answers, it's good to ask. It's good to search. It's good to study. And I find a lot more peace in that than I do in just blindly following what other people tell me and what I'm traditionally taught, and what, comes up, and just like go with it. Like, to me, that's really not really how I ideally want to spend my life. But I know a lot of people don't like that whole, like, when your mind gets challenged for an idea that you've held true, a lot of people don't like that. I can understand how people would think that these recordings are really like not okay to make, but also it's like, I'm not the only one with these questions out there. And I feel like a lot of times when people go to pastors or leaders, a lot of times the leaders won't give you an answer, and a lot of times you might have to search it out yourself, and it's hard to even know how to search it. So that's why I like to talk about the processes of learning about things and how traditionally people do study this kind of stuff, and ways that, those who do want to study it, ways that they can study. And I'm not here to even study to try to disprove stuff, but the Bible's an interesting thing. And when you read it, there's always questions. And it's like, almost every time I read something, I have a question. And I'm just like, why does nobody address these questions? Like, why does nobody talk about this stuff? You know, I can talk about it with my close friends a lot of the time, and like we get along on it, and we're not like fighting and bickering and arguing. Like we can just have a full conversation and leave it at that. You know, to me it doesn't make a difference if Lucifer is real, or if sin is a thing, or Satan is Lucifer, or if the devil and Satan and Lucifer and the serpent are the same thing, or, you know, what happened in heaven and in the universe, and is there a God, or what, and is the Bible real, or is there manipulation, and what's going on with like the interpretations versus the literal, and then the history of the church coming from Judaism into modern day Christianity, and how come it looks so different. Like, these things don't bother me. It's like cool that it's different, and it gives you more to search and more to learn. I'd rather spend my time learning and searching. That's one reason why I'm not so involved in actively sitting in church sermons, which I know it bothers my parents that I don't do that as often as they would prefer. But I feel like I spent so much of my life in church learning that it's like it gets to a certain point where you think for yourself. And, you know, that's kind of what I value. I actually feel like a natural inclination to be like going in those directions, but also, you know, it's also interesting that there's these concepts that come up about like you could be being led by the wrong way, and how do you even know which one's right or which one's wrong? Like, do you feel it? Is it a sense? Is it written somewhere that you can read this and be like, I'm doing this or not doing this? Is it just the concept of love itself that makes things right or wrong? Is it the ego? Is it like, what is it? You know, is it love versus ego? Is it, you know, Bible versus what's not in the Bible? Is it tradition and culture versus what your tradition and culture doesn't teach? Whatever you were raised with that you have faith in, then that's what's right. I do think right and wrong in a lot of levels is an individual conviction. I don't think that just because I believe things one way means that I'm right and I'm more right than maybe my brother or my sister or my neighbor or my parents or, you know, the pastors I grew up with or my buddies or, you know, my coworkers or whatever. I don't believe that I have all the answers, but I believe I have the answers that are right for me at this point in time. I don't even talk about what I think. I think it's more so the search and the journey more so than the destination, that's for sure. And I think it's okay to challenge things. I wasn't really taught to challenge things, but I think it's okay to challenge things. I'm not going to tell people not to do it. I think it's healthy. So for now, I'm going to leave it at that. But, yeah, I don't know what people think, you know, it's complex topics. And, yeah, the whole concept of like right and wrong and like love or not love or love and hate. And, you know, the idea of like Hasatan or Satan being the adversary of man. It's like Satan's against man, trying to trick up humans to get them to be out of love and in towards hate and ego. That seems kind of to be the general theme more so of what's taught in modern days. And you know, I'm cool with a lot of different versions of what could potentially be right or wrong. I love to play with ideas. I love to play with things. I think the more you search and look around, you will get things revealed to you in ways that you wouldn't if you don't search. You know, life is like a big scavenger hunt sometimes, and it's like, well, if you don't put yourself out there and search around and look at stuff, you're never gonna really find anything, you know. And every answer leads to more questions, and so it's kind of like that's just how it's gonna go, you know. And you can put it down or pick it back up. I think it's really valuable, and yeah, I mean, with that, I hope you guys enjoy. I'm gonna keep expanding on this topic, but that's kind of like a massive overview of like, you know, when people start looking at something in their community, you know, determining like, is this right or is this wrong? How do we even get there? And that's even assuming if you even believe in God or the Bible or Jesus, or if you're Jewish or Christian or whatever. That's even assuming, maybe even assuming coming from those backgrounds. There's so many other backgrounds you could potentially come from where none of this would even make a difference. If Lucifer is an angel or what, like, you know, if people don't believe in it, I don't think they could really care less. But I do like the history of literature and things like that too. But yeah, very challenging stuff. I'm always excited about it. Thanks for listening.